The stars shimmered brightly in the blackness of space, their cold, distant light casting long shadows over the galaxy. For years, everything had seemed peaceful. The galactic factions, the mighty species, and the powerful fleets all lived in their separate corners of the universe, with little interaction. But peace is fragile, and it only takes one spark to ignite the flames of war. It started as an anomaly. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker on the radar, a faint disturbance in the vast emptiness of space. But that faint signal was enough to capture the attention of the galactic military leaders. The signal wasn't from any known species. It didn't match any technology or frequency used by any of the alien empires. The source was traced to the farthest edge of the galaxy, beyond the reaches of the known universe. The alien commanders quickly ordered their fleets into action, sending ships and scouts to investigate. There was something about this signal that made them uneasy. The unknown was always dangerous. On the surface, the alien leaders assumed it was just an old, forgotten transmission, something long lost in the vast stretches of time. But they were wrong. The closer they got to the source of the signal, the more the dread grew. As the alien fleet entered the distant system, the reality began to dawn on them. This wasn't an ancient transmission. This was something much more immediate, much more terrifying. It was a human signal, a signal from Earth. The very thought sent a chill through the hearts of those who had never truly feared humanity. The galaxy had long dismissed Earth as a primitive, insignificant world, a place with nothing but weak, fleshy creatures who had no place in the grand scheme of things. The humans were considered harmless, a species too small and too new to make any impact on galactic affairs. But now, this signal proved them wrong. Something had changed. Something was different. The ships at the front of the fleet moved cautiously, their sensors scanning the area for any signs of danger. They were prepared for anything, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to find. As they neared the source of the signal, it became clear. There, on the far side of the system, they saw it. A massive warship, like nothing they had ever seen before. Its design was archaic, yet there was something chillingly familiar about it. The technology was old, but it had a raw, untamed power behind it. The alien fleets stopped dead in their tracks. It wasn't just a ship, it was a message that humanity had not been forgotten. The humans had not been idle. They had been preparing. The warship appeared out of nowhere, but the alien commanders knew they had to be careful. This was no mere accident. The humans had deliberately chosen this moment, this place. The message was clear. They were not the weak species everyone had thought. They were back. The ships in the fleet began to take up positions, surrounding the mysterious human vessel. But the warship did not make a move. It just sat there, silent, and still, like a predator waiting in the shadows. In the distance, the first shots were fired. Not from the humans, but from an unknown enemy. A sudden blast, and the alien ships quickly scrambled to respond, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The humans, however, made no move. They did not fire. They did not attack. They just watched. The enemy's fleet, massive and imposing, turned and retreated. The humans made no attempt to stop them. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the warship remained, a silent witness to the chaos unfolding. For the first time in years, a quiet terror spread across the galaxy. What was this human ship? Where had it come from? And most importantly, what did it mean for the future? The answers would come in time. But for now, the galaxy's greatest fear had been realized. The humans were back, and their return would change everything. As the alien commanders watched the warship, a deep unease settled over them. The humans were not the same creatures they had once dismissed. They were something more, something to be feared. The first contact had been made, but what followed next would shake the galaxy to its core. The humans were no longer the insignificant species they had once been. They were a force to be reckoned with, and no one was ready for what was about to happen next. The sudden silence of space was deafening. The alien fleet had scattered in haste after their unexpected encounter with the human warship. However, the more they watched from afar, the more they realized that the humans were not only present, they were prepared. There was an eerie calm about the human ship, one that unsettled the entire Galactic Council. It was as if the humans were waiting for something, biding their time. The alien generals and leaders gathered in their command centers, each of them glued to their screens, watching the human ship in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. Earth, with its primitive technology and fledgling space programs, had been overlooked by every galactic power. No one had considered the possibility of humans rising to the top of the galactic hierarchy. Yet, here they were, sending out a clear message. They were not weak. They were not afraid. At the Council's headquarters, the alien leaders convened in a panic. Their once confident discussions turned into chaotic arguments as they tried to decipher the threat. Some suggested that the humans were a rogue faction, a rebellious offshoot of their own species. Others feared the worst, that Earth had evolved beyond their understanding and had developed powerful, destructive weapons that were still hidden from view. However, there was one thing they all agreed on. Humanity was no longer the insignificant species they had once thought it to be. Back on Earth, the leaders of the human fleet were also preparing for what was to come. With their advanced warship in place, the humans were not simply acting out of self-defense. They were asserting dominance, declaring that they were a power to be reckoned with. Their warships, though small compared to the massive fleets of the galaxy's most powerful species, were equipped with weapons that could rival even the most feared alien ships. Their tactics were ruthless, precise, and deadly. The humans, unlike the alien fleets, did not rely on sheer numbers to dominate their enemies. Instead, they used their ingenuity and cunning. They knew how to turn the odds in their favor, how to surprise their opponents with unexpected strategies. It was this unpredictability that made them so dangerous. As the days passed, the tension in the galaxy grew. The alien fleets, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves doubting their own strength. They knew that an encounter with the human warship could lead to their complete annihilation. Their fear was not based on the humans' firepower alone, but on something much deeper. The humans had something that no one else had, the will to fight for survival, no matter the odds. The humans were not merely responding to a threat. They were asserting themselves. They had learned the art of war, and they had learned it quickly. The humans were no longer helpless or passive. They were not just trying to survive. They were aiming to conquer. News of the humans' rise spread quickly across the galaxy. Other alien species began to take notice, their curiosity piqued by the mystery surrounding Earth's sudden leap in technological prowess. Some saw it as a challenge, while others, like the Eldarians, feared it as a harbinger of doom. The Eldarians had long been the dominant species in the galaxy, their fleets overwhelming all who opposed them. But now, the human ship was a dark shadow looming over their empire, and they knew that they could not ignore it any longer. On the human side, leaders discussed their options. They knew that the galaxy was a dangerous place, filled with powerful species who would not hesitate to destroy them if given the chance. The human fleet had to be strong, unified, and unyielding. Every resource was being funneled into the war effort, every mind focused on one goal: survival. But deep down, the leaders knew that survival wasn't enough. Humanity had to make a statement. They had to show the galaxy that they were not just survivors. They were warriors. Meanwhile, the alien forces prepared for the worst. The warships in orbit around Earth began to gather, preparing for a confrontation that could change the galaxy forever. The humans, still quiet and watchful, had yet to make a move, but the galaxy's most powerful species knew that this was just the calm before the storm. As the tension mounted, the galaxy watched in anticipation, knowing that the fate of countless species rested on the actions of one small planet in the farthest corner of the galaxy. The humans had awakened, and now the galaxy would learn what happened when a species that had been ignored for so long finally decided to fight back. What would happen next was anyone's guess, But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer the underdog. They were ready to make their mark on the universe, and they would do whatever it took to survive and thrive. The galaxy stood still, holding its breath. In the vast reaches of space, time seemed to slow as the countdown to the inevitable confrontation began. The alien fleets, once the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, now found themselves on edge. They could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. They had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. Back on Earth, the human fleet was quietly preparing for the impending conflict. In the dark shadows of the command rooms, the atmosphere was tense. Officers worked furiously, checking systems, running calculations, and making sure every weapon was primed and ready. They knew what was at stake, and they knew that this was no ordinary battle. This was a fight for their very survival, a fight that would determine if humanity could carve out its place among the stars or be crushed by the forces that had ruled the galaxy for eons. Admiral Marcus, the leader of the human fleet, stood before a large holographic map of the galaxy. His eyes were hard, focused, as he studied the movements of the alien warships. For years, humanity had been watching the stars, gathering intelligence, and building up their strength. Now, that work was about to pay off. "We can't afford to underestimate them," Marcus said, his voice low but steady. "But we can't afford to wait either. They're coming, and we need to make sure they know we're ready." His crew nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They had all trained for this moment, but none of them had expected it to come so soon. The alien fleets had underestimated humanity's capacity to fight, and now the galaxy would learn that humans were not just survivors. They were conquerors in the making. Across the galaxy, the alien forces were in a state of high alert. The once proud generals of the Eldarian Empire gathered in their war council, surrounded by officers and advisors. They had faced many enemies in their time, but nothing had prepared them for the humans. The intelligence reports had been clear. The humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. General Theros, the leader of the Eldarian forces, paced back and forth, his golden armor gleaming in the dim light. His sharp, angular face was set in a frown as he studied the latest data. The human ship was unlike any other, built with technology that defied understanding. It was equipped with weapons that could level entire fleets, and its defenses were nearly impenetrable. "We cannot ignore them," Theros said, his voice cold. "They are a threat, one we must eliminate before they gain too much strength." But even as he spoke, doubt flickered in his mind. The humans were not what they appeared. They were unpredictable, quick to adapt, and fiercely determined. It was this quality that had made them so dangerous. "Prepare the fleet for battle," Theros ordered. "We will show them what it means to challenge the Eldarian Empire. The humans will bow to us, or they will be destroyed." But deep down, Theros knew that the odds were not in their favor. The humans had something that the Eldarians did not: the element of surprise. The alien forces had always relied on their overwhelming numbers and firepower, but the humans were a different breed entirely. Their strength came from their resourcefulness, their willingness to fight against all odds. As the alien fleets mobilized, the human commanders worked tirelessly to refine their strategy. The humans had studied their enemies carefully, learning everything they could about the Eldarian fleet and its weaknesses. They knew that the key to victory would not be in raw firepower alone. The humans would need to outthink their opponents, using their wits and creativity to turn the tide of battle in their favor. Admiral Marcus stood before his crew, a calm and determined presence. He knew that the coming battle would be unlike anything humanity had ever faced before, but he also knew that they had one advantage that the aliens did not: the will to win. The humans were not fighting for power, not for conquest. They were fighting for survival. And when a species fights for its survival, there is no force in the universe that can stop it. "The countdown has begun," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of what was to come. "We will show them that humanity is not to be trifled with. We will make them understand that the humans of Earth do not bow, Do not submit. We rise. The final preparations were made. The human fleet took position, and the first shots rang out across the galaxy. The war for humanity's survival had begun. The aliens watched, stunned, as the humans opened fire with unprecedented precision. It was clear now. This was not the same species they had once dismissed as weak and insignificant. The humans were fierce, strategic, and relentless. And as the battle raged on, one thing became certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The first wave of human firepower lit up the dark expanse of space like a sudden, violent sunrise. The Eldarian fleet, with its majestic, intimidating warships, had never before encountered such resistance. As their sensors registered the incoming fire, the alien commanders realized that their worst fears were being realized. The humans had arrived, and they were not only fighting back, they were winning. Admiral Marcus stood at the command center, his eyes locked on the holographic display in front of him. The enemy ships were massive, their armor almost impenetrable, yet the human fleet was landing blows that even the Eldarians had not anticipated. The key to the human success was not just the advanced weapons technology they had at their disposal, but their ability to think and act quickly. Where other species might panic or retreat, humans pushed forward with a relentless spirit, and this spirit was driving them to victory. Status report, Marcus commanded, his voice steady, yet filled with determination. A young officer quickly keyed in the data. Sir, the Eldarian ships are starting to retreat. We've broken through their lines. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The first phase of the battle was over, but the true test was yet to come. This was only the beginning, and the real challenge was how to deal with the overwhelming forces that still remained. On the other side of the galaxy, General Theros watched in disbelief as his once-feared fleet faltered. He had expected the humans to be weak, to be easy prey for the might of the Eldarian Empire. But now, as he observed the damage to his fleet, he understood the terrifying truth. The humans were not to be underestimated. Send a message to all ships, Theros barked, his voice sharp with frustration. Do not retreat. The humans are nothing but animals. We will crush them. His officers nodded, but their faces betrayed their fear. The humans were unlike anything the Eldarians had encountered. They fought with the fury of a species desperate for survival, and that desperation made them unpredictable and deadly. Back aboard the human flagship, Admiral Marcus felt the tension rise. The Eldarians were regrouping, preparing for a counterattack. The next phase of the battle would be more difficult, more dangerous. But Marcus had no doubt in his mind. The humans were ready. We need to strike now, before they can organize, Marcus said, his tone firm. Focus all firepower on their command ship. If we can take out Theros, we can break their command structure. The crew worked quickly, inputting commands into the ship's systems. Marcus knew that it was a risky move, but it was their best shot. The Eldarians were a formidable foe, but their leadership was centralized. If they could take down their general, it would create chaos within the fleet, and in that chaos, humanity would strike. The human ships surged forward, moving as one in a coordinated attack. Their weapons fired in perfect synchronization, targeting the Eldarian command ship with brutal efficiency. The aliens were taken off guard, their ships struggling to keep up with the humans' lightning-fast maneuvers. It was a dance of death, with the human fleet moving like a swarm of predators closing in on their prey. On the Eldarian flagship, General Theros snarled as he watched his fleet's defense crumble. The humans were relentless, their attacks coming faster than his forces could react. His hands clenched into fists as he watched the damage reports pour in. His command ship was under attack, and the humans weren't showing any signs of slowing down. Prepare to engage the enemy fleet directly, Theros ordered, his voice dripping with rage. We will crush them, no matter the cost. But even as he gave the command, Theros couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Something about this battle felt different. The humans weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting for something deeper. They were fighting for survival, for their very existence. And that made them far more dangerous than anything Theros had ever faced. Back on Earth, humanity watched the battle unfold on screens across the globe. News channels, military broadcasts, and live feeds brought the war to every home, every screen. The people of Earth were united in their support for their fleet, cheering on their forces as they fought against the invaders. There was a sense of pride, of hope, something that humanity had not felt in generations. "We're winning," a young woman shouted as she watched the screen, tears in her eyes. "We're actually winning." Her voice was echoed by millions around the world. The humans were not just defending their home. They were showing the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. But for every victory, there were losses. The battle raged on, and the human fleet faced its own challenges. Ships were damaged, lives were lost, and the strain of war began to show on the faces of the crew. But even in the face of adversity, the humans pressed forward. Their resolve was unbreakable. Admiral Marcus looked out at the stars, a fire burning in his eyes. "We will not stop," he whispered to himself. "We will show them what humanity is capable of." And with that, the battle raged on, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The war raged on, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. After several brutal engagements, the humans had managed to gain a significant advantage. The Eldarian fleet was no longer as coordinated as it had been at the beginning of the conflict. The human forces were relentless, never giving the aliens a moment's respite. But despite the human success, the Eldarians had not yet been defeated, and the final confrontation was still ahead. Admiral Marcus stood in the heart of the flagship, his gaze fixed on the display of the galaxy. The Eldarians, despite their losses, were preparing for a final push. They had gathered their remaining ships into a massive formation, a last-ditch effort to crush the humans once and for all. Marcus knew that this was it, the decisive battle that would determine the future of humanity. "We have to end this now," Marcus muttered to himself, his mind working at a feverish pace. The humans had the advantage in terms of numbers and technology, but the Eldarians were skilled warriors, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. He turned to his officers, his voice calm but authoritative. "Prepare the fleet for a full-scale assault. We're going to hit them hard and fast. This ends today." The officers worked quickly, relaying orders throughout the fleet. The human warships began to form up, taking positions for a direct assault on the heart of the Eldarian formation. The plan was simple but deadly. Strike fast, strike hard, and leave no room for the enemy to recover. Back on the Eldarian flagship, General Theros watched in disbelief as his fleet continued to falter. The humans were everywhere, picking off his ships one by one. The battle was slipping out of his control, and he knew it. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "Prepare the fleet for one last attack," Theros barked, his eyes burning with rage. "We will wipe them out. This is our final chance." But even as he issued the command, doubt began to creep into his mind. The humans had surprised him at every turn, outthinking and outmaneuvering his forces at every step. And now, they were coming for him. "We can still win this," he muttered under his breath, trying to reassure himself. As the two fleets drew closer, the tension in the air was palpable. Every officer aboard the human ships felt it. This was the moment. There would be no second chances. Every move had to be precise. Every shot had to count. The Eldarians had proven to be dangerous opponents, but humanity was stronger than anyone had ever given them credit for. The first shots rang out as the fleets engaged in the most intense battle yet. The void of space lit up with flashes of energy, beams of laser fire cutting through the darkness, tearing into ships on both sides. The sound of explosions, though silent in space, could be felt through the vibrations in the human ships as they took hits. The human fleet pressed forward, not giving an inch. Admiral Marcus watched the chaos unfold. His heart raced as he saw ships from both sides being destroyed, but there was no turning back. The humans had to win. They couldn't afford to lose. If they failed, the galaxy would fall into the hands of the Eldarian Empire. "Concentrate all fire on their command ship," Marcus ordered. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "We take down Theros, and the rest will crumble." The human fleet focused its fire on the massive Eldarian flagship, a ship so large it seemed to dwarf everything around it. Every laser blast and missile launched toward it felt like it was fueled by humanity's desperation. The Eldarians retaliated fiercely, but their defense was starting to weaken. The sheer force of the human assault was too much for them to handle. General Theros, sitting in the heart of his flagship, watched as his ship was rocked by blast after blast. He barked orders to his officers, but there was no escaping the damage. The human firepower was overwhelming. He could feel the defeat closing in, but he refused to admit it. "We must hold the line," Theros screamed, but even his voice held a tinge of fear now. The Eldarian flagship began to shudder violently, pieces of its armor breaking off as the human weapons found their mark. Inside the ship, chaos erupted. The crew scrambled to try and fix the damage, but there was no time. The humans were too fast, too precise. The tide was turning in their favor. Back on Earth, every eye was glued to the screens. The news networks were covering the battle live, showing the world the human forces' incredible victory. The sight of the Eldarian flagship beginning to crumble sent waves of relief and joy across the planet. Humanity had never seen such a united front before, and they couldn't help but cheer as their warriors fought on. In space, the battle raged on, but it was clear now. The Eldarians were on the back foot. They couldn't recover from this. The humans had proven themselves to be a force like no other. And though the battle was far from over, one thing was certain: humanity had earned its place in the galaxy. Admiral Marcus stood at the command center, watching as the final pieces of the Eldarian fleet began to fall apart. He knew the war wasn't over yet, but a sense of triumph washed over him. The humans had faced the most terrifying enemy the galaxy had ever seen, and they had won. The humans had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. The victory was hard-earned, but it was theirs. The future of humanity in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. The battle wasn't over yet, but victory was close, and humanity had just shown the galaxy what it meant to be fearless. The Eldarian fleet was crumbling. Once proud and terrifying, their ships now scattered in disarray, fleeing into the void or surrendering to the relentless human assault. Admiral Marcus stood at the helm of his flagship, watching as the enemy forces began to lose their cohesion. The humans had been fighting for weeks, but now the end was in sight. A final push would seal their victory and crush any hope the Eldarians had of regaining control. "This is it," Marcus muttered to himself, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "Let's finish this." All across the human fleet, soldiers, officers, and commanders braced for the final push. The moment they'd all been waiting for. The moment when they would prove to the galaxy that humanity was not only a force to be reckoned with, but a force capable of defeating even the most advanced and terrifying enemies in the universe. "Fire at will," Marcus commanded, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The fleet launched their final wave of attacks, targeting the remaining Eldarian ships and their flagship, which was now nothing more than a floating carcass. Laser beams streaked through the dark expanse of space, striking their targets with deadly precision. The Eldarian ships had been damaged and weakened, and now they were at the mercy of humanity's firepower. Inside the Eldarian flagship, General Theros stood in the control room, watching in despair as his fleet disintegrated around him. The sounds of explosions reverberated throughout the ship, and the lights flickered as power failed in various sections. Theros clenched his fists, his face pale and drenched with sweat. The fight was lost, and he knew it. The humans had outsmarted and outpowered them at every turn. "We need to retreat," Theros barked at his remaining officers. "Get us out of here, now." But the escape was not as easy as he hoped. The damage was too severe, and the crew was exhausted. The human fleet had closed in too quickly, and now there was no escape. The flagship, once a symbol of Eldarian might, was now a trapped beast, struggling to break free. Back on the human ships, the final wave of attacks rained down on the Eldarian forces. The humans had the advantage now, and they weren't going to let up. Their fighters swarmed the remaining enemy ships, overwhelming them with sheer numbers and precision. The Eldarians tried to fight back, but their resistance was weak, disjointed, and increasingly futile. Inside his command center, Marcus watched the final moments of the battle unfold on the large holographic screen. He saw the Eldarian flagship fall into chaos, its systems failing one by one. Thero's last-ditch efforts to escape were in vain. The humans had dealt the final blow. But Marcus wasn't celebrating just yet. There was still work to be done. The galaxy was vast, and there were more battles to be fought, more enemies to face. Today's victory was only a step in the long journey ahead. "Admiral, the flagship is down," one of his officers reported. "The Eldarians are retreating. It's over." Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of relief before he stood, giving a quick nod of acknowledgement. "Good. Now let's ensure they never return. This galaxy belongs to humanity now." On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The war was over. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's triumph, and the aliens, who had once thought them weak, now saw the full might of human determination and resilience. There were celebrations on every continent as people cheered for their soldiers, for their families, for their future. In the vast expanse of space, the last remnants of the Eldarian fleet limped away, shattered and broken. General Theros, humiliated and defeated, ordered the retreat, but he knew it was too late. The humans had proved themselves. The galaxy would never forget what they had done. As the Eldarians disappeared into the depths of space, Admiral Marcus turned his attention to the horizon. The future of humanity was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were no longer the underdogs. The galaxy now knew that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and anyone who underestimated them would pay the price. "Prepare for the next phase," Marcus said to his crew. "Humanity's story is just beginning." And with that, the human fleet set its sights on the stars, ready to face whatever new challenges the galaxy would throw their way. The war was over, but the journey of humanity had only just begun. The galaxy would never be the same again. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. Humanity had emerged victorious, but the galaxy was forever changed. The Eldarians, once the most feared empire in the cosmos, had been humbled by the might of humanity, and now the galaxy's power structure would have to adjust. Admiral Marcus, standing on the bridge of his flagship, knew that his victory had only just begun. The human fleet had destroyed the Eldarian fleet and pushed them back, but they had also sent a clear message to every species in the galaxy: humanity would not be underestimated again. The days of Earth being considered weak or insignificant were over. From now on, humans would be seen as powerful, resourceful, and capable of achieving the impossible. As the human fleet made its way back toward Earth, Marcus and his officers reflected on what had just transpired. It wasn't just about defeating the Eldarians. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity, with its creativity, determination, and resolve, could stand toe-to-toe with the most advanced civilizations in the universe. On Earth, the news was everywhere. Celebrations erupted in every major city. People cheered in the streets, grateful for the victory that had united them as a species. The world was finally at peace, at least for now. The threat of the Eldarians was gone, and humanity had proven its place in the galactic hierarchy. But as Marcus looked out at the stars, he knew that peace wouldn't last forever. There were other alien empires, other threats lurking in the unknown reaches of space. Some of them might be more dangerous than the Eldarians, and others might seek revenge. But humanity was no longer a defenseless species. They had shown that they could stand against the most powerful enemies and survive. The Admiral turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them we've won, But the journey is far from over. This victory is just the beginning. As the message was broadcast across the planet, Marcus stood tall, his thoughts turning toward the future. The galaxy was vast, and the opportunities were endless. Humanity was ready for whatever lay ahead, ready to explore new worlds, forge alliances with new species, and, if necessary, defend itself against any who dared to challenge its place in the stars. The war against the Eldarians had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of, but it had also ignited a new fire in the hearts of humankind. The victory wasn't just about survival, it was about building a new future, one where humans could thrive, explore, and shape the destiny of the galaxy. As the human fleet made its way back home, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The galaxy had witnessed humanity's strength, but the best was yet to come. The universe was wide and full of challenges, but humanity would rise to meet them, just as they had risen to meet the Eldarians. The war had ended, but the adventure was only beginning. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity proved it could defeat the deadliest predators in the universe. The stars had witnessed the birth of a new era, and humans were at the center of it all. The era of humanity's dominance had begun.